Destiny has been a very interesting game for me to play and try to analyze in a critical context. On a base level, it's missing many things that we've come to expect from a retail release. Generally, gamers as a whole and professional critics alike can excuse a AAA release from lacking a well-told story or mediocre at best voiceover work, as long as it plays well and has enough content to keep you engaged for a couple of weeks. Right now, the only thing Destiny has going for it is its great gunplay, and that's, for the most part, never been enough to carry a game past the first week of sales. And this is why I have a hard time wrapping my head around why I'm still finding enjoyment out of it. My character is almost fully leveled up, I've done the strikes at least twice, I've done the raid twice, but I still get giddy every time I pick up a legendary engram, even if it's without a doubt going to be worse than the exotic I already have. If I were reviewing Destiny, I would rate it a 7.5 at best, which is fascinating to me, because I really like it, and I feel like it brings up a worthy discussion about the process and intent of reviewing video games in general. I'll be the first to admit that on paper, Destiny is not a very good game. There are maybe 15 or so single-player missions, 4 fairly small worlds to explore, and that's frankly being a little generous, because you have to traverse through the same environments to get to the start of these levels. Enemy variance is pretty minimal, you have your standard grunts, snipers, and heavyweights, and the sci-fi elements aren't exactly original either. The story, if you could even call it that, is at times laughable.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
And the ending is rushed and unfulfilling. The loot system is tedious to say the least, especially if you go into the raid expecting to come out of it with your new hard-earned weapons and armor, only to pop out with a couple of Ascendant shards and the Chatterwhite shader. The tower felt novel and exciting to explore for the first few days of playing, but once you realize there are only about 3 people worth talking to in the whole area, there's little incentive to return. Going back to the bounty board or the engram decoder is brutal when suffering through the game's many load times, to the point where you feel guilty asking your party to back out of matchmaking so you can go redeem them. Back when you were level 6, running around hoping for green engrams, the quartermasters and vanguards sold upper level items dangling in front of you to purchase, which certainly made me want to unlock them and test their power, but for an average player, it takes weeks to gain enough Crucible and Vanguard marks to reach them. Considering the game never explains the process of gaining these marks by completing bounties, how many first-time players get through a few dozen hours of playing without even knowing of their existence? If I were locked into a review event, running through the campaign solo, I'd be amazed that the creators of Bungie had not only released the game in its state, but seemed to have such faith in it prior to release. What they promised was an FPS MMO hybrid for the new generation, and what we got was, again, 15-ish levels with a miscasted AI companion, and a plot that mistakes intrigue and secrecy with curtness and brevity. Bungie has promised that this is a story that will evolve over time with new additions of DLC and sequels. Activision stated that Destiny will be the Star Wars of a new generation, but it's like they put out the first half hour of a movie and are making us pay $15 every few months to see what happens next. Are we willing to pay for expansions to unlock new and arguably basic content that should have enticed us, let alone been there in the first place? If Destiny was that movie, no, I probably wouldn't want to go buy it on DVD. But I'll be damned if I said I didn't want to see it in IMAX a couple nights a week before it leaves the theaters. Everything I said before, those are all the makings of a bad game, and as a whole, Destiny would not work if only the shooting mechanics of it weren't so solid. Not since Gears of War have I had so much fun using the controls and terrain to my advantage to genuinely feel like I outplayed an opponent. Nestled comfortably in between the movement mechanics of Halo and Titanfall, it still feels unique and appropriate within its universe. Powers are fun to use, rewarding to unlock, and it feels great watching your character get better and better. If played on higher difficulties, missions can be tough and challenging to overcome, but feel worth it when you finally get it right and beat a boss, made even better if you luck out and get some cool new armor or weapons out of it. Overall, Destiny is just a really solid shooter with a great movement system that allows for dynamic gun battles and variety, with some cool superpowers to spice things up. If you forget about the story and why you're actually heading to Mars to kill some general you've already killed 6 times, and just focus on how satisfying it is to blast away 6 enemies at once with a Nova Bomb, it can be oddly pleasant in its monotony, especially if there's a friend by your side watching it happen. However, this brings me to my point earlier about the review process, and the delicacy of objectivity. Here's where I think the biggest reason for my enjoyment of the game is, and I'm certain this is swayed what started as an objective opinion. Since the first day I got the game, I was always playing with a friend of mine online. We went through the story together, we played multiplayer together, and just recently beat the raid together with a group of other guys. It's been great just goofing around with them and hanging out, essentially just playing video games. I associate Destiny with my friends, and I'm 100% certain that is not the same experience playing through the game solo. Hell, endgame content is basically unplayable without at least one other person in your fire team, and I'd have little interest grinding through the same repetitive missions over and over by myself, but if I had a friend to talk to while doing it, it can be a lot of fun as you overcome the overpowered bosses and compare your fleshed out equipment. So was I enjoying the game itself, or was I just enjoying the company of my friend? If I write a review, do I have to write it in the context of playing solo? How do you score those experiences differently? Because playing Destiny solo and playing with friends is completely different. I think there's a significant disconnect between game reviewers and the public these days, due in particular to the rating system. I'm not here to argue about assigning scores in general, because that's an entirely separate discussion, but I did want to talk about part of the issue. On a rating system of 1 to 10, according to those who review games professionally, 5 is considered average, 7 is good, and 10 is near, if not perfection. These guys potentially play through dozens of games per year, and they don't pay for them. It's easy for them to say, play a game like Call of Duty Ghosts, and say, well, it's not the best Call of Duty, but it's not a bad game compared to other shooters I've played. I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10. For the average consumer who only buys 4 to 6 games a year and pays full price for them, who can afford to spend money on a game that's good, not great? The current Metacritic score for Call of Duty Ghosts, if you average the scores on different platforms, is around 74 or 75 out of 100. That means according to the press, Call of Duty Ghosts is a good game. If you even mention the word Ghosts on any forum or social media site, there's not only a universal dislike of the game, but a universal disgust. As consumers who pay out of pocket, we have a lower tolerance for faults in games because it requires a larger sacrifice of our income and time. To the paying customer, anything below 7 out of 10 is not worth playing, 8.0 is okay, 9.0 is good, and these days a 10 is great. There's always a huge uproar on forums and comment sections when a game like Assassin's Creed Unity is released, with gamers calling it garbage and critics trying to wrap their heads around the outcry over their score. I've lived by this standard of rating games since I first started looking at review scores, and it's rarely failed me. However, I can think of 2 exceptions. The first is Destiny, and another is South Park: The Stick of Truth. The South Park game came out back in March of 2014. As a lifelong fan of the show, it had been on my radar for months. When reviews came out for it, the average was in the low 8s, which as we discussed is just okay. Critics cited the lengths of the game and its simplicity of its combat system as detractions, but said fans of the show would enjoy it. I went back and forth for a while. I thought to myself, I can only afford to buy so many games in a year, am I really going to use it on an 8 out of 10? So I finally went with my gut and bought it, and I loved every second of it. It was the definition of fan service, packed with references from the entire show's history, hilariously inappropriate scenes, and just brilliant writing. When it comes to personal preference, I'd rate it a 10 out of 10, but that wouldn't be a fair assessment to others who aren't as familiar with the show as I am. When reading a review of a game based on an established franchise you're already fond of, is it better to read the thoughts of someone who's just as big of a fan as you are, or someone who's never seen the show before coming in with what is, for argument's sake, an objective opinion? And then which opinion is fairer to consumers? Which opinion is fairer to the developers when scores for their games start coming out? The point I'm trying to make with all of this is that gamers shouldn't be upset when a game like Watch Dogs gets an 8 out of 10 because they think it deserves a 6, and game critics shouldn't be surprised when the community reacts when they call a game like that good. Scores will always mean different things to different people based on expendable income and how much time a person can devote a week to playing a game. Lastly, in the case of games like South Park, which are tailor-made for fans of the show, is it more helpful for consumers to listen to an objective review or one written by the target audience? People seem to forget that one critic's score of a game doesn't necessarily reflect the opinion of an entire staff of a website. It could be refreshing and ultimately beneficial to consumers if a game like South Park is reviewed by someone who's never seen the show, in addition to someone who tries to tune in every Wednesday night just like I do. Anyway, this is all just some food for thought. Thanks for watching.